Dustin Baker, VikesNow, coming to you with my second guest, who was Wes Johnson. He writes for Vikings Territory and he co-anchors an NFL-themed podcast that we do every Wednesday called NFL Trend Zone. Wes, tell us your Twitter handle and tell you how you've been, my man.
Hey, Dustin. Yeah, Twitter handle is at Wesley A. Johnson. I have been great. We just got done with our podcast. It was real fun round robin mock draft. Um, Had some surprises in there. Vikings got a surprise pick. So yeah, I'm doing great. Middle of the week, ready to finish strong and get going on this thing.
Spectacular. Well, just like I told Sean, I hope that you'll be a regular and join us with your takes in the off season, in the regular season, in the postseason, in the lead up to the Super Bowl, all that fun stuff. But for our viewers who are getting to know you, first of all, when and how did you discover these Minnesota Vikings?
I would say probably around 5 or 6 years old. My parents had split, I want to say when I was 6 years old. My dad was a Vikings fan, and I wound up living with my mom. And to kind of keep some kind of connection with my dad, I started following the team that he liked. He was a big football fan, not too much into basketball or any of the other sports, but football was his thing. And so the Vikings quickly became my team.
Well, amen to that. Well, we're lucky to have you aboard on the Purple Train. I want to jump into some of the red meat of this offseason, specifically the transactions, the draft. And the first thing I'm going to hit you with, it might be an eye roller, but I don't care. Why is it so hard for the Vikings to understand during this last decade since Hutchinson and McKinney retired or went elsewhere? That pass protection is generally how teams are guaranteed to get to the postseason. Do you believe that the current regime, with that mindset as a fact, is taking reasonable steps to fix the interior line with the Davises and Reed and Oli Udo? What say you?
I think so. Here's the thing with the Vikings. So over the last decade, they have invested in the line. Since 2016, the Colts and the Vikings have invested the most draft capital on the interior offensive line, and probably two ends of the spectrum with results. Colts have been fantastic on the interior of the offensive line. The Vikings, not so much. To me, that comes down to two things: coaching and scouting. With Spielman and Zimmer's crew gone, I'm hopeful that the incoming O'Connell and Kwesi, they're able to fix those issues. I think that that's their thought process as well. They see the high round picks invested in a lot of these offensive linemen, and they probably view it as this could just be a coaching thing. Now, obviously, there have been some subpar players like Oli Udo, who is part of my pinned tweet. You say his name 3 times in the mirror, and a yellow flag suddenly appears. So, I'm hopeful that new offensive line coach Chris Kuiper is able to make something of this squad. And I do believe that they will address the offensive line at some point in the draft, probably on the interior as well. So
do you think that would be a center, or do you think that perhaps they envision one of these free agents sliding over to Bradbury's slot if he still isn't a first round type of player?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think it'll come down to best player available.
Okay.
I believe that their approach is trying to add depth and trying to add players that might offer, one specific good quality or good area that they excel at, and then by piecing them together with the other players along the line, some type of cohesion happens and it winds up working. That's kind of how I see this whole Moneyball approach in baseball, and how I envision it in football anyway.
Okay, wonderful. What I told viewers on this four-way camp battle coming up with the Davises, Reed, and Udo is that for it not to work, four men will have to suck.
Yeah.
And a new coaching staff who's self-professed offensive minded won't be good enough to make one guy out of four even be average. So I think that is the optimism. If we need to find it in the spring and summer to finally fix these pass protection woes, is that they're having a foursome to try to solve this damn thing, because there's a lot of dudes coming in now. Udo, we know most about, and
Right.
Wyatt Davis is this gigantic mystery. But I think our viewers and listeners should take solace in knowing that at least there's going to be a large competition. Whereas in years past with Zimmer and whichever offensive coordinator he had with the revolving door, it would be about two of these guys, and their names usually start with a D and is in Dozier. So keep that in mind. Here's the next question. And on the audio side of our enterprise, on the 20th of April, I'm going to ask Jordan Reed. This is my first question because I really want to hear his take. But first, I want to get yours. Give us your pulse on Kellen Mond, because we keep talking about, well, what happens if Cousins doesn't work out with Kevin O'Connell and then he's on the chopping block? When will we draft a quarterback? Well, they drafted one last year, but because Zimmer didn't necessarily care for him, we've kind of soured, like, well, then he ain't that good. So give us your pulse on Kellen Mond. Does he excite you for life after Kirk? And will he win the QB2 job over the mythical Sean Mannion?
Yeah, I was excited when we drafted him last year with our first of three third-round picks, and a little disappointed that we didn't get to see him in the Green Bay game when Cousins had to miss it with COVID. So I don't know. I'm not so sure now. I know we saw him a little bit in that game, but it was pretty lackluster. He might be kind of a raw prospect still right now. I'm hopeful that some tutelage under Kevin O'Connell will help, develop him. But I do believe he will begin the year as quarterback number 3 on the roster.
And we're back to a repeat of last year. And that's strange because a QB3 should be able to strike at the QB2 position, but we shall see. All right. So Wes foresees Mond kind of in the same role that he was last year, kind of underwhelming. We'll see if O'Connell can change that. One of the reasons I had you on the show is because you say when you're not personally gambling on it or giving the advice to your buddies behind closed doors, that you're not all that great on the predictions. However, when you're on something with me, you say stuff and it comes true. I think notably about a year and a half ago, you predicted it was either TJ Watt or DeAndre Hopkins. One of those first, you said, watch out for the Cardinals. And I was like, yeah, they're not doing that. And then my cell phone buzzed and boom, whoever it was went to the Cardinals. Your track record is pretty damn good for this space. The Vikings have the 12th pick in this draft. Tell us your forecast for the 12th pick. Do they select something? Who is it? Or do they trade?
I think they're probably looking at 4 or 5 guys that they really like, that if they are there, they'll probably pounce on. If not, I could foresee them sliding back a little bit. Philly would be an excellent trade candidate. Slide back to number 15, possibly pick up an extra third rounder from Philly. They have their own and then a compensatory pick. The Vikings, they have no 4th rounder this year. So I think adding another mid-round pick is something that's probably on Kwesi's radar. The reason being, with the Moneyball approach, I think that he wants to try and add as many players and talented ones as he can that create competition at different spots. And I think sacrificing 3 spots to drop down is something within his wheelhouse that he'd be comfortable doing while still picking up a mid-round pick that could be utilized on a player that could have some impact this year.
You said they probably like 3, 4, 5 guys. I can't let you off the hook. Who are those guys?
Definitely the 2 corners, Sauce and Stingley. I'm sure they'd be interested in the edge. Who that would be, it could be any one of the three or four top guys. The other two, I maybe a wide receiver. Thielen's getting up there in age. If one of the wide receivers that they might be targeting starts to drop, they might pounce on it, and then probably Kyle Hamilton, the safety.
Okay, amen. Let's talk about Kirk Cousins. I believe from what you've said on our other venture, the NFL Trend Zone podcast, I believe that you think Cousins is around the 11th, 12th, 13th best quarterback in the business. And usually when a guy like you or a guy like me says that, we're labeled as a Cousins defender. And we're like, okay, we're just calling it like we see him. The idea going into this offseason is that this new brand of leadership, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell, looked at the roster and says, shit, we can win with this. So they are re-upping with the pretense that they can unlock Kirk's potential, perhaps like the defensive-minded coach could not. Do you subscribe to that theory? And do you think that, Cousins' ceiling is something that we haven't seen yet?
I absolutely subscribe to that theory. Kirk has been playing lights out the last 3 years. Each year he seems to get better. Pass protection aside, I mean, he's done wonders with some of the holes in that interior offensive line. Does he have shortcomings? Absolutely. I think a coach like Kevin should be able to scheme around some of those shortcomings and deficiencies and hopefully unlock, the best of Kirk Cousins that we have yet to see.
So when you got the news, was it that fateful Sunday 2 or 3 weeks ago that says Cousins has been extended? Did you think, oh shit? Or were you like, all right, baby, let's do this?
Yeah, I was like, let's do this. I mean, it's not a crazy extension. People like to freak out about the money, but I mean, ultimately, if you are a quarterback that produces, you're going to get paid. Look at Jared Goff's contract. That's god awful. He produced, for a year and had a Super Bowl run, and the Rams gave him the bag. Cousins, I mean, he's produced year in and year out. The Vikings haven't had the results that I would say necessarily dictate keeping a quarterback like that or a price tag at that price tag around for as long. But as I mentioned before, a lot of this comes down to the coaching and to the development of players. The Vikings have done a poor job of developing their high round draft picks surrounding the offensive line. Whether that's scouting issue or what, I'm not certain, but I'm hopeful that this new regime is able to get the most out of these prospects that they're drafting.
The thing that's funny about Goff's contract is it is right there in Kirk's ballpark. Nobody cares. Yeah. Nobody, not one iota, nobody cares. He went to the Lions, and I think it's just because Goff isn't very good that nobody expects him to even remotely play up to that price. So it's crickets, whispers. Nobody gives a damn that he's right up there in the top 10 in terms of quarterback salary. I'll eternally find that comical. All right, second to last questions, my man. Here's the deal. So when a team who is contending, like these Vikings are announcing, so to speak, that they're going to be ultra competitive in 2022, usually you shouldn't use the NFL draft as your final fail-safe to fill out a roster. You should have a strong depth chart, and this damn event is all gravy. So let's keep that in mind. Do you consider this Vikings depth chart as it stands on April 7th as a deep one, a paper thin one, or right in between?
I think it's right in between. They definitely have some areas where, at least on paper, they appear to be deep. Some other areas that, they looking into future years, contract wise and age wise, they definitely need to start gearing towards getting younger or getting some of these more cost controlled contracts on the books. Cornerback being one of them. They have a couple of guys on 1 year deals, which I think the Vikings did a good job of addressing a lot of these areas in free agency with the money available and still being able to get quality players, be it on 1 year deals, but at least they've filled the roster enough to where they'll be able to go into it or at least go into the draft without having to reach for any one prospect. I don't feel that there's any one need at 12 that we absolutely have to get, which is good. That's what you want as a general manager for a team. And as a fan of the team, you want to be able to be in the position to take the best player available, or to be able to take a deal like I mentioned and trade back to accumulate more.
The funny part was about 3 weeks ago, it felt like that they were going to have to use a 12th pick to, for Christ's sake, go get a cornerback. Or at that point, Danielle Hunter, a trade felt real. And so it felt like they were going to be using early rounds of the draft just to field a starting lineup. Now that was, all we need was a little patience in retrospect, but they did, get Zadarius Smith, which was a humongous addition, at least on paper, and good health willing. And then Patrick Peterson re-upped, which felt like a little bit of a long shot in the final days leading up to the extension, because he kept saying over and over throughout the offseason, I want to come back. I want to come back. And nobody did anything. All right. So here's the final question. I'll set this up. Yeah. Rick Spielman was employed for this purple team for 16 years. And when a man is there that long in a position of power, you can usually predict his little tricks, the 7th round joke or cornerbacks over and over. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah doesn't have a track record, or at least if you have to try to go find one, it's being a voice in the room with the Niners and the Browns. So let's operate under the idea that there might be something that's either a shocker or we didn't see coming at all because the man is unpredictable. Tell us what a potential Kwesi shocker on draft night might be.
Yeah, this one I had to think long and hard about, but I think I got a good shocker here, and that is I think that he would trade back at 12, even if Sauce Gardner or Stingley are on the board.
Oh boy, I don't know if he can stay employed that way with these fans.
And it goes to my thoughts on the Moneyball approach with, I think he wants to accumulate as much talent as he can. Granted, those are two of the top tier talents available at their position. But I think he wants to try and grab as much talent as he can early. And the way you do that is by, accumulating a lot of early picks, especially in a draft as deep as this one, at some of those positions of need.
So have you talked yourself into this, hearing him talk over and over about value? Have you talked yourself into the fact he's probably going to trade down?
I don't know if it's for certain thing, but I would not be surprised.
Okay.
Like you just mentioned, it's tough to get a read on what he's gonna do. The other way I was considering answering this question is that he doesn't make any trades, but
yeah.
I think with us not having that 4th rounder, it kind of, I want to say the 4th round is when we start to see the drop off of kind of the talent that can more than likely make a difference on this year's roster. And then we get into the depth signings to where it's just adding beef to certain parts of the roster.
All right. Any parting shots, closing arguments for April 7th on VikesNow?
None here.
None. You got them. All right, cool. So that's Wesley A. Johnson on Twitter. From time to time, he writes for Vikings Territory. He'll be a regular guest here. I think that's all we got, isn't it, my man?
That is.
All right. Well, that's all we got. I will be back with Nick Olson on Friday, and he'll get a similar set of questions to Wes, and we'll pick all these guys and gals' brains about their Vikings takes and prediction. But that is it. And Skol, baby.
Skol.